The knife sliced through fabric 2 inches from Pablo Sanchez's face, and in that moment, he knew that one small muscle spasm had destroyed 3 lives. They'd been inside the mattress for 40 minutes, bodies contorted in ways that defied anatomy, breathing recycled air that tasted of foam and fear. The checkpoint was supposed to take 5 minutes to clear, 10 at most, but the line of vehicles had crawled forward with agonizing slowness, and Roberto's leg had started to cramp 30 minutes ago. Pablo had felt it happening, in the suffocating darkness of their hiding place. Pressed so close they could feel each other's heartbeats, he'd sensed Roberto's muscles beginning to seize. The slight tremor that started in his calf, the involuntary twitch that followed, and then, as the truck rolled to a stop at the inspection booth, the fatal jerk that made the entire mattress shift. But the story really began 3 days earlier, in a warehouse in Tijuana that smelled of rubber and broken dreams. Pablo had been living in the border city for 2 months, working construction jobs when he'd find them, sleeping in a room he shared with 6 other men. Every morning, he'd stand at the fence that divided Mexico from California, watching commuters stream across with their special passes, their American lives just 20 feet away, but impossible to reach. He'd tried twice before, once hidden in a car trunk that got too hot, forcing to bang on the lid until the driver let him out, abandoning the attempt. Once on foot through the mountains, turned back by Border Patrol helicopters before he'd made it a mile. Each failure ate away at his savings and his hope. The mattress plan came from a coyote named El Flaco, a thin man with nervous hands who claimed to have the best success rate at the San Isidro crossing. His method was ingenious in its simplicity. Custom-made king-size mattresses with hollowed-out centers, just enough space for 3 people if they didn't mind becoming temporarily boneless. Delivered in moving trucks along with legitimate furniture loads. The drivers had papers, proper business licenses, regular routes that made them familiar faces to border agents. $8,000 per person. Groups of 3 only. Any more, and the weight distribution looked wrong. Payment front, no refunds if caught. But El Flaco swore his system was foolproof. 17 successful crossings in the last year. Only 1 failure, and that was because the client had been drunk and started singing inside the mattress. Pablo met his crossing partners the night before. Roberto was his age, mid-20s, from Oaxaca, with callous hands that spoke of farm work and eyes that held too much disappointment for someone so young. He'd been deported twice, separated from his wife and infant daughter in Los Angeles. This was his last attempt. Either he made it or he gave up and accepted a life of watching his child grow up through video calls. The third was Elena, a woman in her 40s who said little about her reasons but carried herself like someone running from something worse than poverty. She had a quality of stillness that made Pablo think she'd be good at staying motionless. In the mattress, that mattered more than anything. El Flaco showed them the setup in a garage that doubled as an upholstery shop. The mattresses looked perfectly normal from the outside, expensive ones, pillow tops with fancy stitching. But inside, carved out with surgical precision, were spaces that looked like cloth coffins, air holes hidden in the seam work, reinforced sides to prevent sagging, even a small battery-powered fan to circulate oxygen, though El Flaco warned it was only for emergencies. They practiced getting in and out, learning to slide to the zippered opening in the side, positioning themselves in a specific configuration that distributed weight evenly. Elena in the middle, the men on either side, everyone on their sides with knees drawn up. Once sealed inside, they had to remain absolutely still. Any movement could create suspicious bulges or shifts that trained agents would spot. The driver, a Mexican-American named Carlos who'd been running furniture between Tijuana and San Diego for a decade, explained the process with the bored efficiency of someone discussing grocery shopping. The truck would carry 6 mattresses total, 3 legitimate ones stacked on top, their special cargo hidden underneath. At the checkpoint, he'd show his papers, maybe chat with agents he knew, submit to routine inspection. Dogs weren't a problem. They were trained for drugs, not people. X-ray machines were only for suspicious vehicles. As long as everyone stayed still and silent, they'd be through in minutes. They did a test run that night, 30 minutes inside the mattress in the garage, just to make sure everyone could handle it. The space was tighter than Pablo had imagined. Their bodies fitted together like puzzle pieces. The foam pressed against his face, making every breath a conscious effort. Roberto's elbow dug into his ribs. Elena's hair tickled his nose, but they managed it, emerging sweaty but confident when El Flaco unzipped them. The real crossing was scheduled for afternoon, peak commercial traffic time when inspections were quickest. They met at a different warehouse, this one active with legitimate shipping business. Pablo had nothing but the clothes on his back and 3 phone numbers written on his inner arm in pen. Everything else he'd left behind or sold. Getting into the mattress for real felt different. This wasn't practice. In 20 minutes, they'd either be in America or in handcuffs. El Flaco checked their positions one last time, reminded them about stillness, then zipped them into darkness. The sound of the zipper closing felt like being sealed in a tomb. They were loaded onto the truck, other mattresses piled on top. Pablo could hear muffled voices, the clang of the truck door closing, the engine starting, then movement, the sensation of driving, turns that pressed them against each other, stops that made them slide slightly within their fabric prison. Time became elastic in the darkness. Pablo tried counting seconds, but kept losing track. The air grew thick quickly, despite the tiny fan whirring somewhere near his feet. Sweat pooled where their bodies touched. Elena's breathing was so controlled, he sometimes wondered if she'd passed out. Roberto was less disciplined, his breath coming in barely suppressed gasps that seemed to use up more than his share of oxygen. The truck stopped and started repeatedly. Traffic lights, Pablo assumed. Or maybe they were already at the border, inching forward in the inspection line. No way to know. The only reality was darkness, foam, and the growing certainty that they'd suffocate before anyone found them. Then came the long stop. Engine off. Voices outside, muffled but clearly official. American accents. They'd reached the checkpoint. Pablo forced himself to breathe slowly, shallowly. This was it. 5 minutes of perfect stillness, and they'd be through. He could do 5 minutes. He'd done 30 in practice. Mind over matter. Think of something else. His mother's kitchen. The job waiting in San Diego. Anything but the foam pressing against his face. Carlos's voice, casual and friendly. Papers rustling. A joke that made someone laugh. Normal sounds of a routine inspection. Pablo started to relax. This was working. They were invisible, just foam and fabric. That's when Roberto's legs started to cramp. Pablo felt it before Roberto made any sound. The sudden tension in his body, the catch in his breathing. A Charlie horse, the kind that made you want to scream and stretch and move. But movement meant death. Or worse, deportation and a 10-year ban. Stay still. Pablo thought desperately, as if Roberto could hear his mind. Fight through it. Few more minutes. But he could feel Roberto's whole body starting to shake with the effort of not moving. The muscle spasm was spreading, biology overriding willpower. The voices outside continued their routine, checking paperwork, asking about the cargo. Everything normal, everything fine, as long as nobody moved. Roberto's leg jerked. Not much, just a reflexive kick against the cramp. But in their compressed space, it might as well have been an earthquake. His knee drove into Pablo's stomach, making him grunt involuntarily. His foot pushed against the mattress wall, creating a visible bulge. The whole mattress shifted on its pile. The voices outside stopped mid-sentence. Pablo held his breath. Maybe they hadn't noticed. Maybe the movement looked like settling cargo. Maybe a hand pressed down on the mattress, directly above where Roberto's foot had pushed out. Probing. Testing. Another hand joined it, feeling along the surface, searching for irregularities. Spanish voices now, urgent and suspicious. Roberto was shaking uncontrollably, the cramp turning his leg into a torture device. Elena remained perfectly still, but Pablo could feel her heart racing where her back pressed against his chest. His own pulse thundered in his ears, surely loud enough for the agents to hear. More voices, a dog barking, the sound of other mattresses being pulled off the pile. They were searching now, really searching. It was over. 3 lives destroyed by a muscle spasm. The knife entered near the top of the mattress, sawing through layers of fabric and foam. Light poured in, blinding after the darkness. Pablo saw a uniformed arm, a face peering through the growing hole, eyes meeting his. The agent's expression shifting from suspicion to confirmation. They cut the mattress open like gutting a fish, exposing the three people curled inside like organs. Harsh commands in English and Spanish. Hands reaching in, pulling them out. Pablo's legs wouldn't work after being compressed so long. He collapsed on the concrete, blinking in the afternoon sun. Roberto was crying, still clutching his cramped leg, apologizing in a broken stream of Spanish. Elena said nothing, just stood with her hands behind her head as instructed, dignity intact even in capture. Pablo felt empty, hollowed out like the mattress that had failed to hide them. They weren't the only ones caught. The whole operation unraveled in minutes. Carlos arrested, his decade of legitimate business destroyed. El Flaco's other drivers pulled in for questioning. The warehouse in Tijuana raided. 17 successful crossings meant nothing against one cramped leg at the wrong moment. The processing was routine for the agents, special for the captured. Fingerprints, photos, interviews. Pablo told them nothing about El Flaco or the operation. Loyalty to criminals seemed stupid, but what else did he have? They already knew everything anyway, had probably been watching the operation for weeks, waiting for the right moment to roll it up. Roberto couldn't stop apologizing. In the holding cell, he kept explaining about the cramp, how he tried to fight it, how sorry he was. Pablo told him it wasn't his fault, but they both knew that was a lie wrapped in kindness. One moment of involuntary movement had destroyed multiple lives. That was fault, even if unintentional. Elena finally spoke during their second day in detention. She'd been a prosecutor in Guadalajara. She told them, went after the wrong cartel, lost everything, career, home, family members. America was her only chance at staying alive. Now she'd be sent back to Mexico with her name in the system, location known. She said it calmly, like discussing the weather, but Pablo understood. Roberto's cramped leg had possibly signed her death warrant. They deported Pablo first. Same bus ride to the border he'd taken before. Same walk across the bridge. Same Tijuana streets waiting on the other side. But everything felt different now. He'd burned through his savings. His construction contacts would know he'd been caught, making him too risky to hire. And somewhere in the U.S. government database, his biometrics were filed under inadmissible. He found out later what happened to the others. Roberto made it back to Oaxaca, gave up on America, took a job that paid pennies, but let him see his daughter grow up. Better than nothing. Elena disappeared 3 weeks after deportation. Maybe she went into hiding. Maybe the cartel found her. No way to know. The mattress operation made the news briefly. Border agents foil creative smuggling attempt. A few paragraphs about the modified furniture. Some quotes from officials about constant vigilance. No mention of cramped legs or ruined lives. Just another victory in the endless border war. Pablo stayed in Tijuana, finding work where he could, sleeping in the same shared rooms. But now he was truly stuck. No money for another attempt. No coyote willing to take someone with a recent deportation. No legal path available for a construction worker with a smuggling attempt on his record. Sometimes he'd see El Flaco around the city. The thin man had avoided prosecution somehow, probably by paying the right people. He was running a different scheme now, something with false compartments in refrigerator trucks. Still promising foolproof methods to desperate people. Still collecting $8,000 a head for dreams delivered in darkness. Pablo wanted to warn people. Wanted to grab them and explain about mattresses and muscle cramps and how one involuntary movement could destroy everything. But who would listen? Hope made people deaf. Made them believe they'd be the ones who stayed perfectly still, who fought through the cramps, who made it to the other side. He started working at a maquiladora, one of the 4 known factories that lined the border. The pay was nothing, the work mind-numbing, but it was steady, legal, safe. He could see America through the factory windows, so close he could hit it with a rock. But it might as well have been on the moon. The other workers all had stories. Failed crossings, deportations, families divided by the border. They compared scars and strategies, debated which coyotes were reliable, which routes worked. But fewer tried anymore. The border had hardened. Technology made hiding harder. Penalties grew steeper. The mattress trick had been one of the last clever ideas, and even that had failed. Pablo sent what money he could to his family in Michoacan. Not much, but enough to keep his younger siblings in school. They had plans for university, professional careers, legal ways to travel. He'd sacrifice his chances so they wouldn't have to hide in mattresses or trust their lives to strangers' promises. A year passed. Pablo learned English from American supervisors who praised his work ethic while paying him a fraction of American wages. He moved to a better room, one he only shared with two others. He stopped going to the fence, stopped watching the crossers with their special passes. That life wasn't for him anymore. But late at night, when the city settled into exhausted sleep, he'd dream about those 40 minutes in the mattress, the darkness, the recycled air, Roberto's leg beginning to shake, the moment when everything fell apart. In dreams, sometimes Roberto stayed still. Sometimes the cramp never came. Sometimes they made it through the checkpoint and emerged in San Diego, free and laughing at their clever escape. But mostly he dreamed of the knife cutting through fabric, the light pouring in, the agent's face looking down at them like specimens in a science experiment, the walk back across the bridge with inadmissible stamped on his soul. 3 people had fit inside that mattress. 3 stories, 3 desperate attempts at something better. Elena running from death. Roberto trying to reunite with family. Pablo just wanted to work. Reasonable dreams that required unreasonable risks. Human needs that demanded inhuman compression. The mattress was probably in a government warehouse, somewhere. Evidence in a case that would never go to trial. Cut open and hollow, its secret revealed. A monument to clever desperation and biological betrayal. Proof that the human body wasn't meant to be cargo, no matter how carefully you carved out space for it. Pablo still lived in Tijuana, still worked at the Maquiladora, still sent money home. He'd learned to exist in the shadow of the border, neither here nor there, neither Mexican nor American, just another ghost haunting the line between nations, carrying the memory of 40 minutes that changed everything. Sometimes new arrivals asked him about crossing, young men with fire in their eyes and plans in their heads. He'd tell them about the mattress, about Roberto's leg, about how one muscle spasm could destroy 3 lives. Some listened, most didn't. The border was full of people who believed they'd be different, special, blessed with bodies that wouldn't betray them at the worst possible moment. Let them believe, Pablo thought. Let them try. Maybe they'd make it. Maybe they'd beat the odds that had beaten him. Or maybe they'd end up like him. Like thousands of others, caught between the place they'd left and the place they couldn't reach. Living reminders that borders weren't just lines on maps, but scars on souls. His name was Pablo Sánchez. He'd hidden in a mattress to cross a checkpoint. Someone had moved wrong. Such a small thing, a cramped leg, an involuntary kick. But small things became everything when you were compressed into spaces where humans weren't meant to fit. He'd learned the hardest truth about borders. Sometimes the body itself became the betrayer. No matter how strong your will, how desperate your need, how clever your plan, you couldn't always control the flesh that carried your dreams. And in that gap between intention and biology, entire futures could disappear. The mattress had promised invisibility. 3 people tucked inside foam and fabric, hidden in plain sight. But bodies weren't meant to be invisible. They cramped, they moved, they demanded space and air and dignity. Roberto's leg had simply insisted on being human, at the worst possible moment. That was the real crime, not the crossing attempt, but a system that forced people to compress their humanity into impossible spaces. That turned bodies into cargo, and dreams into contraband. That made a muscle cramp the difference between reunion and deportation, between safety and danger, between life and whatever came after. Pablo carried that knowledge now, along with the memory of darkness and foam and the sound of a knife cutting through his future. He'd survived. Roberto had survived. Elena, who knew? But survival wasn't the same as living. Not when you were trapped in Tijuana. Watching others attempt would have broken you. Knowing that somewhere in a warehouse had a gutted mattress that held 3 people's hopes for exactly 40 minutes too long.